All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to For the Love of Language. EJ here.
And I am Stacy the Linguist. Again, we are pre-recording these because of vacations and illness and all this fun stuff. So we haven't been on Twitch for a while, but that's okay.
We will be back.
We will be back eventually once Stacy gets her life together.
Yes, we do love Stacy's live stream fans. They're amazing, and we will be back.
Yes, we will indeed be back.
Mm-hmm.
So in our previous episode, I had hinted about talking about sound symbolism. So I thought we'd just dive into that. What do you say, EJ?
Let's do it. Tell me about sound symbolism, Stacy.
So sound symbolism is very, very fascinating. And I think I mentioned that I have a professor at my school who's been doing a lot of research in sound symbolism. But probably the most obvious, the first study anybody really talks about when it comes to sound symbolism is the Kiki and Bouba experiment. So the Kiki and Bouba experiment was essentially some linguist, I forget his name, but somebody did this test where they had a very spiky shape, a very pointy shape, and then they had a very blobular shape that looks kind of like a cloud. And they put it in front of people from all different cultures, all different linguistic backgrounds, and said, okay, which one is Kiki and which one is Bouba? And EJ, maybe you can kind of tell me what your impressions are. Which shape would be Kiki and which shape would be Bouba?
I'm going to say that Bouba would definitely be the cloud and Kiki would definitely be the sharp one.
And cross-linguistically, pretty much like almost 100% of the time, people would choose Kiki to be the spiky one and Bouba to be the blobular cloud-like one, right? And that all comes down to sound symbolism. For some reason, the k sound, the Kiki sound, sounds very sharp, sounds very pointy, right? And the Bouba, the B sound, the U sound, it sounds very blobular, right? And it's this very fascinating phenomenon where certain sounds are like affiliated with certain traits. And I say traits in a very broad way, right? So that's like your initial example. But there has been a lot of research done as to what kind of characteristics might be associated with certain sounds and stuff. So the professor at my school, she did this really cool experiment with Pokemon, because Pokemon exist in their own little world, right? It's their own little world that has its own little naming conventions with these little pocket monsters that have these unique traits, right? So it's these creatures that don't exist in the real world that you have to find a name for.
Oh my gosh, I hope that no one gets offended at you calling Pokemon pocket monsters that don't
That's
actually...
what it stands for! It's pocket monsters. That's what the Japanese is called. It's just what it is.
I love it. I did not know that.
Pokemon pocket monsters. Anyway,
like that makes sense. I guess
it makes sense. But anyway, so she did a cross-linguistic study looking at the names of Pokemon cross-linguistically to see what kinds of traits would often overlap. And her research was extensive. And we won't go super into it, but there were certain qualities where like long names were usually affiliated with larger Pokemon, where short names were affiliated with small Pokemon. Anything that had sort of like repetition, kind of like Kiki, was usually affiliated with something small and cute, words, names that had bilabial sounds. So M's and B's were usually associated with something cute or little, or like a younger evolution of the Pokemon, because Pokemon go through like different evolutions. They have like 3 or 4 different like states of being.
And that one, there could actually be some really good linguistic, acquisition reasons for.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you also consider things like mama and dada or baba are like very common, like almost universally. Like parents are called like mama or baba or dada because they're very easy for the child to say.
Yeah, and that's like across languages that aren't even related to each other. Those will be the words for a mom and a dad because they are the easy ones for kids to say. So it's a really really interesting fun fact.
Yeah. So yeah, like cross-linguistically, a lot of bilabial sounds will be associated with children or infants or young things. Same with front vowels, high front vowels. So anything that has an E sound is often usually associated with things that are small or cute or baby like think about the word baby just in and of itself. You have 2 bilabial sounds and a high front vowel. It's like meant to sound cute. Or what do you call a young dog?
Puppy.
A puppy. What do you call a young cat?
Kitty.
A kitty. It has these like cute high front vowels that kind of indicate its smallness.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like another trend that they found. And they often found that like, low back vowels, things that were like long, or I'm trying to think of like good Pokemon names. Anything that had like a low back vowel, like an O or an A.
Bulbasaur.
Yeah, Bulbasaur was usually affiliated with something kind of strong or big, right? Anything that had kind of like that big sound in the mouth because it has a lot of space. Because when you think about it, like high front vowels, there's not a lot of space in your mouth. You close it up to make that E sound. But if you have an aw sound, you're opening up your mouth. It's a big, broad sound.
And that was actually why doctors will tell you to say ah, is because the act of saying ah forces your tongue down and to have your mouth be open to see stuff.
Yeah. So it's very fascinating. And it's really interesting that you find these things cross-linguistically, because a lot of it is associated with like your physical body, right? And like general language acquisition, like how do all babies acquire language? They all kind of use bilabial sounds initially, because those are really easy to mimic. Right. And a lot of these sounds, again, the bigness and the tallness and the smallness are all kind of like physical traits that can manifest cross-linguistically as well. So it's very interesting to see how that happens.
So a question that I have, has your professor published this research yet?
She has, yes.
Could you tell us, I guess, her name? Do you know the names of the papers?
Yeah. Her name is Stephanie Shih, Shih. I don't remember the exact name of her work, but if you sound symbolism, if you just kind of like look up that, she's done a lot with that. She also did a little bit because we were talking about names in our last episode, and she also looked at like baseball players' nicknames from like back in the day, or like how baseball players' nicknames have like changed over time, and kind of like how their nicknames, like the phonetics and phonology of their nicknames might be associated with like their baseball stats. Very fascinating stuff as to like how naming conventions might match up in sound symbolism to like your physical characteristics.
That's fascinating. And that makes me wonder, is there a causal relationship there? And is it that like if you're a more high performing player, you get given better names? Or like, what does that actual connection look like?
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And I can't remember all of the work that she did on it, because there was like, and it like it's a little bit messy too, right? Because nicknames are more than just like the phonology and the phonetics, right? Like there's also a lot of social stuff that goes into it.
Oh, yeah. If you have a nickname that's like super positive and lifts you up, that's going to have a totally different impact than,
Than being called like, hey, butt face, you know?
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Well, there was actually a Freakonomics example. I'm pretty sure it was in the Freakonomics book of parents who named one child winner and another child loser.
It's horrible.
It is horrible, but I believe that winner ended up like in prison and loser went by like Lou and ended up being like super successful.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Like the way that you're named can kind of like set you up for certain expectations. I would say that that's even true with like my nickname. Like I don't know if you remember my capoeira nickname, but it's Estrella, which means star. And so there is kind of like an expectation for when I show up in capoeira that I am an energetic and like out there kind of person, even if I'm not feeling it that day.
It does fit you pretty well, though.
I know. They did a damn good job of naming me that.
Yeah, you're a pretty bright personality, I would say.
Oh my God.
So we talked about the Bouba Kiki effect. We talked a little bit about magnitude symbolism with like how big your mouth needs to be in order to create these sounds. That's probably a weird description.
We were talking about nicknames and like expectations with naming.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything else that we should cover as far as sound symbolism? I guess the one thing that comes to mind for me that is at least somewhat related would be like onomatopoeias.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So basically, onomatopoeias are when you have a word that is actually meant to reflect a sound. So like really common ones will be like bang, boom, screech, maybe animal noises as well, where
Yeah.
we say cows say moo and dogs say woof, all that kind of thing. Those are examples of onomatopoeias.
Yeah. What's really fascinating is looking at onomatopoeias cross-linguistically.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who like anyone who's like studied another language probably knows that like the animal sounds are different. And they're like, why are the animal sounds different? The animal is only making one sound.
No. Obviously, the animals in France speak a totally different language
Oh,
than
of
the animals in the
course.
US.
That is obviously what's going on. That's obviously what's going on. No, because the animal is making the same sound. What changes? The language does.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where like phonological inventories come into play, right? The animal may be making one sound, but depending on what sound, like how many sounds your language has access to, you're going to mimic that sound with whatever you have.
Definitely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So in English, we say cats say meow, kitties say meow meow, right? Because we're capable of having these like big long diphthongy vowels, so we can say meow, but not every language does that. So in other languages like Chinese, it might just be mao, just mao,
right?
Instead of a meow, it might just be mao, right? Which is pretty close, right? Or the infamous cock-a-doodle-doo of a rooster, right? And cross-linguistically, it's really interesting to see that, like, you can find videos all over TikTok and YouTube of people comparing the onomatopoeias for like animal noises, and they're always like, but why do you call it that? Ultimately, it just comes down to what sounds does the language have access to that most closely mimic whatever sound the animal is saying.
Right, because like when it comes down to it, most languages don't naturally create like, and maybe the human mouth itself can't naturally create the sounds that the animals are actually saying. Like if you have the quack of a duck or, whatever sound it is, we just try to get a close sound approximation with what works in the language. And then, historically, those come down over time. But it has to fit into not only the sound structure, but also the syllable structure and the morphology of a language. So a good example with syllable structure, like in English, we can have multiple consonants, a vowel, maybe multiple vowels, and then we can even end the syllable with multiple consonants. I believe in Hawaiian, there's a very strict syllable structure of each syllable is only one consonant, one vowel.
Yes.
And so you can't say something like rasp in Hawaiian or like splunk. You can't say that in Hawaiian. You have to split it up so that it's always one consonant, one vowel.
Yes.
And so that will impact how languages create these animal sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like, because English is crazy, we can have a long structure like cock-a-doodle-doo for a rooster, where like another language is like, no, that's like way too long or way too complicated. Like there's too many consonants involved here. The rooster is saying just like roo or something, right? Like I'm having a hard time coming up with some right off the top of my head. But right, so it is very like language dependent, which is kind of funny because like humans can very well mimic like the sounds of animals, right? But when you're referencing the sound an animal makes, you don't make the sound of the animal, you have like a name for the sound of the animal, and that's kind of what the onomatopoeia is. It's the name for the sound. It will mimic the way it sounds because that's just a good way to name a sound, but you're not like actually trying to replicate exactly what the sound is, if that makes sense. It like onomatopoeias are fascinating, like as a linguistic and like semantic concept. Like the naming of a sound is what you're trying to do, but you're using the sound as like a template for how the name of the sound will sound.
Right. It ends up feeling a little bit recursive in ways.
It does, but language is recursive. So recursive, for those who don't know, means it like kind of loops.
Right. It's something refers back to itself.
Yeah.
Refers back to itself. Refers back to itself.
Yep, exactly. And language is really, really good at doing that, where you can have like never-ending sentences, or you can just kind of loop a sound over and over. Anyway, onomatopoeias and sound symbolism is absolutely fascinating, and it's very cool to see how it works cross-linguistically because of like phonetic inventories and how that kind of plays into things, but then how a lot of sounds, just because of how they're shaped phonetically, they will have certain meanings attached to it that seems to be universal in some instances.
Definitely. And I think it is worth calling out here as well, like not every word is going to have sound symbolism attached to it.
Definitely not. Definitely
everyone has thousands and thousands of words in their vocabularies. And so, yeah, there is a subset of those where it definitely applies and where it definitely matters. But in just like your day-to-day descriptions of things, it's not going to be the most common feature of your language.
Yeah. For example, any sort of like functional grammar, like articles, and the, do those have sound symbolism? No, they're just supposed to function as like an article. It's just something to like indicate. It's not meant to have like this like special meaning, right? So a lot of like functional words will not have sound symbolism because frankly, it's doing enough heavy lifting. It doesn't need to have any sort of meaning attached behind it, you know? It's already carrying so much grammatical weight.
Yeah. So super, super interesting stuff to think about. Is there anything else that you want to touch on with sound symbolism, Stacey?
Maybe I can just sort of issue a challenge to our listeners. We haven't really done this before, but I think it would be fun to maybe challenge some of our viewers and see where they find sound symbolism in their language or languages, because I know we have some polyglots that listen in, and maybe how that differs, or where they see some of this stuff pop up in like their everyday lives. I'd love to hear some examples. You could share with us like your animal sounds in your language. I'd love to hear them. Or if you do have like an instance of sound symbolism, kind of like I mentioned with like the Pokemon stuff, where there's like, a small vowel indicates something like little, right? See if you can find some of this stuff in your everyday life, and feel free to share with us on Instagram at For the Love of Language. Maybe we'll highlight it and put it in our story. Who's to say?
Yeah, and I'll create a post actually asking for these as well, so you can add comments to that. So yeah, definitely follow For the Love of Language. We'll have an interesting conversation there.
Yeah, let's see what y'all come up with, because I think it's like I said, it's supposedly sound symbolism is supposedly like a universal thing. So if you disagree, or if you have examples in your language where maybe this doesn't apply, just tell us about sound symbolism and where you see it in your life, or maybe where you don't.
Cool. Well, we will close out there. Hopefully that was interesting. We're super excited about some of the episodes that we have coming up and guests that we're going to have on our podcast.
Yeah, tell us about our next guest that we have coming up.
Yeah. So what we're planning on for our next episode is I have a friend who is an ASL interpreter.
American Sign Language, for those who aren't familiar.
An American Sign Language interpreter who has some fascinating experiences, and I'm super excited to have her on.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah, definitely. So follow Stacy the Linguist on Twitch, follow For the Love of Language on Instagram to get in touch with us, and we'll see you all later.
Bye.